What up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the one, the only show we got next. This is going to be the edition, essentially just covering everything with the playoffs and what happened last week. So it'll just be like our time to talk through everything, what are our thoughts going forward, because we have 4 games that are coming up. Odds are very spaced out outside of that Kansas City Chiefs Buffalo Bills game. Kind of just diving into everything. Hopefully, you all did, I guess I would say, decent in terms of any sports bets that you all did last week. I know it was a tougher week. I can even admit on my side that it was tougher. There were some things that you just didn't really expect to happen. And yeah, because I thought the Browns would win. I thought the Rams would win. Both of those did not happen. But kind of just going into games, my take, my thoughts, and you're probably like, yo, Hayes looks a little chill today. Well, we gonna be in Cancun with the Eagles. We just gotta be chill because we ain't in the playoffs no more. But kind of just diving into everything and looking at it, we have the Browns and Texans. So the Browns lost 45-14. Let that sink in. To start, the leading passer was not even CJ Stroud. The leading passer was Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco threw for 307 yards, 1 touchdown, essentially 3 touchdowns, basically, because, he had them pick sixes that ended up happening in this game. He had 2 of them. One went for 82 yards, the other one went for 36 yards. And CJ Stroud threw for 274 with 3 TDs. Even got the backup David Mills in there for 1 pass for 6 yards. Looking at things, the running game was stopped. So that's something that the Ravens focus in on, the running game. They love to rush the ball. And the Browns only had 20 carries for 56 rushing yards. Joe Flacco had 3 of them for 13. Whereas Jerome Ford had 9 for 17. Looking at what happened with the Cleveland Browns in the receiving game, David Njoku was the big thing. He had 11 targets, and David Njoku and Harrison Bryant led the way. And that's something that Lamar Jackson should focus in on when you have both of them, because the Ravens have Isaiah Likely, and then they have potentially Mark Andrews. That's a speculation. Mark Andrews might play after his injury. We'll kind of see how that ends up going. On the flip side of things, Devin Singletary has emerged. It's really the Devin Singletary backfield, and then anyone else can try and get some touches here and there. Dameon Pierce had that 1 season, but he didn't do anything this game. He had 3 rushes for 0 yards. Nico Collins has clearly shown himself as the way. They lost Noah Brown and Tank Dell, and Nico Collins is still doing stuff. He had the most targets. Nobody else had more targets. The other thing is, those 2 pick sixes played an important factor in all of this because Joe Flacco threw the ball so much more. They were just more efficient, the Texans, with everything that they ended up doing. Looking at everything with the Texans, too, Nico Collins led the way. Brevin Jordan just had that one long run. That was really it for him. John Mechie got involved, which is shout out to him, especially all that he had to go through. And Devin Singletary was the second leading receiver on the Texans. They're going to have their hands full because the Ravens are a much different team, but it's not nearly as far as some people might think when it comes to this game. The Texans have a chance. The Ravens are not an unbeatable team. I've always said the Ravens have a solid defense. They don't have the greatest defense. There are holes and gaps in their game if you can end up figuring it out. That's kind of my takeaway from that game. Looking at the next game, you do have the Texans and the Ravens. I don't like to do this. I'm going to pull the random okie doke and say the Texans. If anyone knows me, I am doing that. But I'm going to say the Texans in that one. They're at plus 310, so it's solid odds you can end up getting if you want to pick a game like that. Kind of going into the next game, we have the Browns and we have the Chiefs. Chiefs love the cold, clearly, and they're going to go play another game in the cold. The line at the start was minus 4.5. Over under was 43.5. So the under hit, and then the line hit as well by light years. That joint hit, however you want to end up calling it. But it was 26-7. Tua Tagovailoa did throw 20 for 39 for 199 yards. And then Patty Mahomes threw 23 for 41 for 262 yards. Both had a touchdown. A difference maker was that pick that Tua had. The run game was another important factor because in total, the Miami Dolphins did have 18 rushes for 76 yards. Kansas City Chiefs had 34 rushes for 147 yards. Big discrepancy there. Almost double the amount the Chiefs had. And a lot of it was Isaiah Pacheco. So this is going to be a good game between the Chiefs and the Bills because Pacheco and James Cook are both rushers. In terms of the Bills, Chiefs both like to go with their bell cows. In that Patrick Mahomes did have 2 rushes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire did in there as well. They did have a touchdown. Those are the different impact things that you can end up seeing. There was a rushing touchdown because they pounded the ground, and then also there was a pick. If both those things did not happen, that does play a factor in the game if you look at it that way. Although the other part is the Dolphins just didn't really want to play in the cold. Jalen Waddle was out there. He had 2 receptions. Tyreek Hill only had 5 receptions for 62 yards. It wasn't even like Tyreek Hill had that big of a game. If you looked at the line of scrimmage sometimes, L'Jarius Sneed jammed the hell out of him. And that's what you got to do. So that's something else. One, because they play. The Chiefs used to play with Tyreek Hill. So they kind of know which ways to end up working Tyreek Hill, and they found it. I think going forward, a lot of teams need to end up looking at that and saying, you know what, let's just jam the hell out of Tyreek Hill at the line of scrimmage and see where we end up going. Have a safety over the top. So if he does get out of that jam, and also you want to force him, I would say keep him toward the out of bounds line. If you bring him inside, that's too much space for Tyreek Hill to work with. Some receivers, you want to force them inside where there's more help. You want to keep Tyreek Hill. You can keep him towards the out of bounds line so that you essentially have 3 defenders. You have the cornerback that's on him, you have the safety in the back, and then you have out of bounds. So you really don't have that much to work with. And then make sure that ball has to go to the inside part of the field because most quarterbacks are going to be like, damn, we cannot fit it in that window. We need to end up having more space for Tyreek Hill. Something you do need to realize is Tyreek Hill is not the tallest. It'd be different if Tyreek Hill was the fastest and the tallest out there. It would be impossible to guard. But those are the different things that you end up playing around with. Looking at it, sacks-wise, the Dolphins had no sacks, which meant that the Chiefs did fill that pocket up. They had 4 tackles for loss, which does play an importance. 3 pass deflections, and then 5 quarterback hits. Looking on the other side, the Chiefs had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 6 pass deflected, so double the amount, and 5 QB hits. So they really had the same amount of quarterback hits. Another thing that did play a part is Harrison Butker did have 4 field goals, and Jason Sanders had none. So different things that played a factor. They made sure to get into Harrison Butker's range so he can end up kicking these field goals. And between those, the running touchdown, and then also that interception played a factor in that. Looking at the next game, which is going to be the big game, which is on Sunday, you have the Chiefs and the Bills. You know, if anyone knows or watched the show at all, you know the Bills are the team I always have to go with. It's just how it is, and that's how it's just going to continue to be. Looking at the next game that did happen, which was the Sunday game, and then we have the Packers and then the Cowboys. The score does not tell you what the game actually was because the Packers mollywopped, destroyed, did whatever you want to call this game. The Packers took them to town, and that's really all you can call it. It was really, at halftime, it was 27-7. And then after that, it was 41-16. 41-16 before they ended up starting putting up points. So it wasn't garbage time points, but that's something that the Packers need to work on because when you play the 49ers, it's going to be different. Jordan Love did have a great game. That was an efficient game. Passer rating of 157. He was 16 for 21, 272 with 3 touchdowns. And then you had Aaron Jones on the ground going ham, 21 for 118, 3 touchdowns. They own the Cowboys in that regard. I have my own thoughts as to how this happened because why do the Cowboys continue to lose in the playoffs every single year? This is bigger than a choke. it almost makes it feel like, yeah, we're not about to like let the football gods make this happen to the next round. Kind of going to the next one, you did have a pick six. So the pick six did play a factor as well in that. And just kind of looking at what happened over on the kicking side for the Cowboys, they only had one field goal. And then they had a missed extra point, but that doesn't really play a full factor and everything. That was weird too, because Brandon Aubrey doesn't miss. And for Brandon Aubrey to end up missing a field extra point, that played an importance too. Kind of just scrolling into everything, looking at the running game, it was fairly even. The touchdowns were the difference. And another thing is you need to look at how long those touchdowns were. So two things we'll end up talking about is one, the Packers had a wide open touchdown. Like it was a play fake, tight end wide open, score the touchdown. There was nobody around. When you looked at the camera, there was nobody. Like straight up. Romeo Dobbs was 6 for 151. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup both were good. But a lot of this again was garbage time, and it switched the game up because the Packers were able to run the ball, and the Cowboys weren't able to end up running. They had to go to the passing game. So this might have been more even because you have 272 and then you have 403. Also, diving deeper into the numbers, you have three receivers that had 90 plus yards for the Packers, for the Cowboys, whereas for the Packers, you only had one. And yeah, that's really what this comes down to. Then you have the Packers and the 49ers. I have to go with the 49ers. That's one you can't really choose the Packers for as much as you want to. I really do have to go with the Packers in that one. Going to that Sunday night game that we had, it was the Rams and the Lions. That was a really good game when you end up looking at it on paper because at halftime it was 21-17 and then it was field goal straight on the second half. So looking at diving deeper into the numbers, you did have Matthew Stafford that had 357 passing yards, no picks. Jared Goff had 255 touchdown. The difference was running touchdowns too. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery did what they do, but when you look at what happens during crunch time, they put their workhorse in. And another thing is the workhorse of David Montgomery, he got solid yards. They also stopped Kyron Williams. And the next thing that you're going to have to look at in this game, it's going to be the Lions and the Buccaneers. The Lions are going to have to stop are going to have to stop Rachaad White. That's going to play an importance. The other thing is the Lions are not good at the passing game. And the Buccaneers have two solid receivers and a good tight end. When you look at it, Puka Nacua had 9 for 181 and a TD. That was the only thing. That was the main person. 181. This man had over close to 50% of the passing yards Matthew Stafford threw. Looking at it on the other side, who is it? The Lions. So the Lions are going to have to put their best guys up against Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of like what the Bucs are going to do too. Jahmyr Gibbs did play a factor in the receiving game, 4 for 43. Sam Laporta only had 3 catches. So that's something else. Just kind of look at that and pay attention to what is going to happen come next game. Another thing we can look at is the sacks. So we had 3 sacks for the Rams, 2 sacks for the Lions. The Lions are going to have to shore that up because they can't give up a good amount of sacks on Jared Goff. Or you even have tackles for loss. It was 4 and 5. Yes, that was even. Quarterback hits was another thing that was even, and that's why the score looks as even as it does. Looking into the kicking game, Brett Maher was 3 for 3, and then you had for the Lions, Michael Badgley was 1 for 1. Looking at this game, Lions Buccaneers, I have to go with the Lions, so it's going to be Lions 49ers in the conference championship. Bills game, that was one of those that Josh Allen just kind of went off. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Josh Allen just played a really good game. He was solid. That's the game you really want to see. And then the last game, you don't even need to talk about. Only thing that comes out of that Buccaneers-Eagles game is the fact that Jason Kelce retired. The Eagles gave up. There is no which way about it. James Bradbury needs to be cut. He should not be on that team anymore. There's nothing you can say about that. The Eagles were 10-1, and they just fell apart. So kind of just going in after this week, you're going to see changes. The Eagles are going to have changes, and I think the Cowboys are going to have changes. And it just shows you that yes, those teams are the best in that division. Giants aren't going to be the same. I can say this right now, and I'll say more of my bold predictions at the end of the season. The Commanders might play a factor next year. I can see them fighting for a wild card spot or being in that little area. Get yourself a quarterback, get yourself a solid head coach that can be there. You have the receivers for it. If you can get your running back game good to go, then you should be fine. So it's really going to be who is going to be your play callers that are going to be up in there for the Commanders. I know that Sam Howell is good. I do not think Sam Howell is the answer. I will give you guys something towards the end of the week as well. So hopefully this was something just to kind of recap. I always want to do this after the season is kind of, well, the week is over with. So my picks and calls for this week, I have the Texans, I have the 49ers, I have the Lions, and I have the Bills. Anyone that knows me knows why I chose the Texans, but that's what we're going to go with. Plus and minuses, the closest one is going to be that KC and Bills game. Till next time, this is Hayes. Catch you later in the week.